Welcome to Embracing Autism IRL. Today we're exploring AuDHD, the intersection of autism and ADHD. Joining me is Sarah Hendrickx, a renowned AuDHD author, speaker, and consultant who has delivered over 1,000 autism training workshops and written multiple books on neurodiversity. With her deep expertise and lived experience, Sarah will help us break down what AuDHD is, how it differs from autism or ADHD alone, and why awareness is growing. Let's dive in. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, Leah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I've learned a lot about myself through your videos, and so I actually give you the credit for me finding out my own diagnosis because I was
Oh,
not at all familiar with how ADHD and autism looked like, particularly in women. So because of you, I figured it out. So thank you.
I don't know whether that's thank you or sorry or what. I don't
It's a thank you for sure. It's helped for
know.
the better.
Good,
Um,
good.
so for our listeners who maybe have not nerded out as much on as I have about you, could you tell them a little bit more about your work, who you are, and any connection that you have to the autism community?
Okay, so I've been working in the autism world for maybe 25 years or so. I started as a learning support assistant in a college, working with young people in education who had a range of different disabilities. Bearing in mind that 25 years ago, a lot has changed since that time. I then went on to run a project, a voluntary sector project for young people with Asperger's syndrome. Through the process of that, I learned that my partner had Asperger's syndrome, as was called then. And then he and I started, we wrote a book together about our relationship nearly 20 years ago because there wasn't very much out there about relationships that was very positive. And what we had learned ourselves was not our experience. It wasn't particularly positive. Fast forward a few years, I then realized that I was autistic too because I didn't know that at the time. Again, the whole women thing wasn't really a thing. So I'd written 5 books on autism before I realized I was autistic, and also had a master's degree. Still didn't quite add up for me. I started writing books, so I've written a number of books. The most recent is a second edition of a book on women and girls with autism. I've also just completed a book with my ADHD daughter Jess, called "Could I Really Be Autistic?", which is for people to go through the process of self identification. And I'm currently writing a book on AuDHD called "The Complete Guide to AuDHD," which is a lot of pressure. But as we shall learn, there's not a great deal known about AuDHD yet. So maybe it won't be a very big guide. And maybe in a few years' time, we'll make it bigger.
So, as you mentioned, making it bigger, we are seeing an increasing recognition of ADHD and what I would consider prevalence now, because as you are becoming more familiar with it, you then start seeing more people with it because people didn't pay attention to it before. And so, for those out there listening, ADHD again, we're referring to the combination of both autism and ADHD. Could you explain a little bit more about what the nuance is with ADHD and how it differs from just autism or just ADHD?
Okay. So as well as all the other stuff, I'm also a diagnostician. So I've done about I don't know how many, maybe 2,000 or more assessments, and more we're seeing people come forward with both. So there's a really big reason for this, which is important, which is that some of your listeners, viewers will be familiar with the DSM, which is our diagnostic manual of all neurodiversity and all sorts of other things as well. And that we're now on version 5. It gets updated every few years or so. Every version prior to version 5 had an exclusion which said that autism and ADHD could not be diagnosed together in the same person. This only was removed in 2013 when the DSM-5 occurred. So that's 12 years ago. So we really haven't had this as a diagnosis officially. I'm sure there were people, giving it maybe, but officially it could not be diagnosed in one person before 12 years ago. if we put that into context of Asperger's syndrome, which, as we know, is autism minus learning disability, intellectual disability, that came into diagnostic manuals in 1994. So that's about 30 years ago. And we're still only catching up with that as an idea of autism for a lot of people. So we've got a very long way to go before we actually start to understand this thing. The other reason that things are a bit tricky when you've only got 12 years of diagnosis is that you don't have anyone to study. And so there are very few research papers out there. For the book I'm writing, I'm doing a literature review, and I found papers going back as far as 1999, where researchers were kind of spotting that there were maybe attention differences or sensory differences in these individuals that were either diagnosed with autism or ADHD. But it's quite a small number, and the research is almost all on children. And so what we're seeing now, as the same with autism and ADHD singularly, is that we're diagnosing backwards through families. We're beginning with the children. They're getting the diagnosis first. And then we're going, oh, hold on a minute. Auntie, uncle, grandma, mom, dad. Yeah, I was like that too. And so the people that are coming forward for diagnosis now, many of them are adults and parents. So this is a very interesting time where it's really the first time that people can come and say, I think I think this is a thing for me. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of people who maybe had one diagnosis given, either autism or ADHD, and they're saying, yeah, it answers some questions, but it's not everything. And he's certainly in the case of adults, we're talking about people that may have been looking for decades and decades, going to therapy, having all sorts of anxiety, depression, other diagnoses, who are looking for this answer. Why am I different? Why am I odd? Why don't I fit in? Why do I struggle? And then they come across autism or ADHD, they get the diagnosis, they go, yeah, great. But what about this bit? And so I guess that's where this comes in, is that now people are going, that's the other bit. So I don't think I entirely answered your question, but that's sort of why we are where we are, I guess.
No, you definitely answered it, and it was eerily similar to my life. It was quite on the nose. I also got a late diagnosis after my kids were diagnosed. I first got my ADHD diagnosis at 16 after I graduated high school because I was struggling so much and I was going to college. So I needed something. And then it took all the way until having kids and having those kids get diagnosed to realize that there was also this other like social component, all that other stuff that was happening too. So that was like, it was almost like you just read my life story.
Weirdly, I know we're all individuals, but every time I meet people doing assessments, you just hear, it's my life too. You just hear these stories kind of over and over again. I was diagnosed with autism in my 40s. I didn't appear to be or typically autistic at all, as you can probably tell. I talk really fast and I talk a lot and I'm quite animated. And my partner is very much Rain Man Sheldon, classic classic autistic male sort of traditional profile. So I was thinking, well, I'm not like him. I can't be this. And eventually that was a thing. But the ADHD for me I was only diagnosed with ADHD last year. And the reason for that was menopause. And that changed me and the way I experienced my life, myself, my neurodiversity, to the point where I actually thought I'd like to try medication. And so for me, that was the reason for going for that diagnosis. It is beginning to be thought that people with both ADHD don't benefit from medication perhaps in the same way that people just with ADHD do. I don't
I
know a
have,
lot about that, but there's some research coming out that may suggest that. So I don't take medication because it didn't work
yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I
But
have
that's
heard that.
how I
And
go.
that's exactly what happened with me too. Like I
Yeah,
tried medication, it didn't work for me either. So I did look into that too, and I saw the studies starting to come out. There's not a whole lot of research.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what's interesting, so you mentioned like your husband as well. Um, have you run into any sort of like gender difference with ADHD? Like, have you found if it's more prevalent in like females or males, or is there any patterns so far?
It's hard to say. I think I'm obviously only seeing a very small number of people. The majority of people that are coming forward for diagnosis in adulthood in the service that I work for are women. So I can't tell whether that's just because there are more
Yeah.
of them or because all the guys have already been diagnosed years
Yeah.
ago or something. But I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting from the perspective that what we know about neurodiverse women, particularly autistic women, are that they have often in the past been diagnosed with bipolar syndrome, they've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, they've been diagnosed with psychological things. And I do wonder whether this, again from my own experience, this mix of the autism and the ADHD makes us not quite look autistic or quite look ADHD in its pure form, if you like. And so it can make us look very dysregulated, very changeable. On the one hand, we're impulsive. On the one hand, we're risk averse. And I wonder if it makes us look a bit crazy, if I dare use that word, in a mental health sense. So I am meeting people who have had these borderline personality disorder, emotionally unstable personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and actually they believe that the AuDHD explains their experiences better.
Yeah, I've actually seen that as well with people that I know getting a lot,
Mm.
especially women getting those diagnoses, and then it turns out that it is this combo that you're talking about. But you did
Yeah,
also mention like one or two things about the distinction there between that autism and ADHD. What are some key signs that somebody might be ADHD rather than just autistic or just having ADHD? And for my
yeah.
parents that are out there listening, because it's primarily an audience of mothers, what do you think that they can do to kind of start working out whether or not ADHD is something in their child?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk in big generalizations and big stereotypes. So obviously there's going to be people out there going, don't those, I'm not like that. I don't do that. That's not what it looks like. I know. But the only way that we can describe these things is to kind of go back to the diagnostic criteria for both, look at what they say, and then look at what that looks like in the real world. And yes, it might fit, and no, it might not. That's all we can do, essentially. So I think fundamentally, to me, um, autism is about often being overwhelmed, is a heightened stress level, high anxiety. The world is basically too much. It's on the whole, it's too much. It's too much noise. It's too much change. It's too much people. It's too much stuff. It's too much touch. It's too much. Oh, everything's just too much. Fundamentally, ADHD is about not enough. It's about I'm bored. I need stimulation. My emotions are kind of all over the place. I'm looking for the buzz. I'm looking for the new shiny thing to get excited about. Lacking dopamine, looking for that kind of buzz. That's not to say that either of these people can't be over or understimulated, but fundamentally, I think that's sort of what we're talking about. With autistic people, we're looking for repetition. We're looking for things to stay the same. We don't like things to change. We want to eat the same food. We want to have two of the same winter coat, me. We want to eat the same lunch every day, me. We want to do all of these things the same. That's what we want to do. ADHD is still requiring some sort of spontaneity, novelty. So we're kind of making crazy plans. We're going, hey, I'm going to do this big adventure. Oh, something on Facebook came up about canoeing across the entire of Scotland. This is true. So I'm going, Keith, my partner, we're going canoeing across the whole of Scotland. That's what we're doing. To me, that's the ADHD. So we've got these kind of two bits. One of them's going, leave things alone. And the other one's going, come on, let's just throw it all up in the air and have some fun in here somewhere. So I think the core of all of this has to be this, what we call emotional dysregulation, where you are either bored or overwhelmed almost all of the time. And this line that where you're okay is really, really hard to find. And I think that goes for all ages. It's certainly very much my experience. And it's so you're constantly kind of falling off this tightrope all of the time. And one person, I've just been starting to do some research for the book, and one person described her child as having Ernie and Bert from Sesame Street inside his head all of the time. And I just thought, that's it. That's all you need to know about ADHD is that you've got these two people who are going, hey, hey, let's do this thing. And the other one's going, no, oh, let's stay where we are. And trying to live like that is really hard. It's really hard as an adult, but it's really, really hard as a kid because you don't know this. As a diagnosed adult or a self-diagnosed or self-aware adult, you can say to yourself, I know what's going on right now, and I know what I need to do about that with a bit of trial and error. If you're a child, this is just overwhelming to have this contradiction, almost this variability, just things. Yeah. And I guess as parents, it's that I think if you have an autistic kid, you kind of know that they get stressed because people, because change, because environment. That's why autistic kids get stressed, overwhelmed, have meltdowns. ADHD kids just could be so many other things. It could be that they're just overexcited. It could be that they're bored to death. It could be that they want something and they have to have it now because the dopamine has gone wee and it's the best thing in the whole world and I can't wait. And I think if you're getting bits of both, then we need to be having a little look at those sorts of things.
So, one of the things that I have a question about in your
Mm.
perspective, do you think that there's overlap between like the social component? Because one of the things that my husband and I discussed on a recent episode, we talked about AuDHD, is how a lot of times people say that there is no like social component to ADHD, but I personally feel like there is, in the sense that people with ADHD are just as likely, in my opinion, to struggle with social relationships, but it's like for
Yeah,
entirely different reasons. And I was
100%.
wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I haven't got this far in my research reading for my book, but there's certainly some research papers that were written about this. Whether the ADHD kids that they tested were different in their social relationships than the autistic kids and the ADHD kids. I think again, big generalizations. The autistic kids don't know the social rules, don't know what to do, maybe scripting, maybe quite stilted, quite awkward, maybe dominating conversations about their own interests, maybe showing not too much interests in other people, maybe not making typical facial expressions, not reading typical facial expressions, not understanding jokes, sarcasm, lying, deceit, things that are non-literal, essentially. Again, yes, generalizations, but that's sort of fundamentally autism. Also, sometimes not seeing the point in people. I mean, really just why are they even here? Some people genuinely say that. I have no use for these people. I much prefer animals. Animals don't judge me. Animals, I know what they want. I don't have to work it out. Animals don't bring stress. People bring stress for autistic people. I think there is some evidence that ADHD people also are not always great at reading body language and facial expressions. I think there's some research into that. I think ADHD people perhaps struggle to wait to speak. And certainly in my experience, the sort of, I'm going to call them pure ADHDers, their personal space is they're on you, they're very loud, they're very intense, quite draining, they're just whoa, a lot of energy coming your way. I think often quite motivated to socialize, but seen as a bit troublesome. They're the ones that lead the other kids astray because they wanted to do something fun. They wanted to climb up onto the roof of the school. That's happened. And so other people's parents see them as trouble. So they're often excluded because they're too much, and other people can't kind of quite handle them. They get into trouble at school, perhaps because they're inattentive and distracted, and they speak out. So they're unpopular sometimes for different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about that recently with my husband, and one of the things that we also noted was kind of like the social pressure aspect. It feels like when you're having a conversation as an autistic person, in my experience, I struggle for different reasons at different times. So for me, like the autistic part is I have a hard time sometimes judging like, okay, do I jump in now? Do I wait? Do I wait? Is it my turn yet? But the ADHD part of me is like, oh, I need to say something. I have to hurry up and blurt it out. So I do see like kind of like similar behavior, but on the outside, but internally, the reasoning behind it is different. Do you experience that too?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you start putting the two together, you end up perhaps with someone very socially motivated who really wants to go to the party and have the fun, but I think burns out quickly. And I wonder if that's when the autism comes in. The ADHD gets you to the party because party, dopamine, noise, food, yay. And then once you're at the party, suddenly autism turns up and goes, oh my God, what are you doing here? It's full of people. Oh God, crash and burn. So I think we see that sometimes in that booking loads of activities and then cancelling them all as they approach. It seems to me perhaps to be a classic AuDHD type response. That,
Do you have
or
any
the autistics would just never have booked them in the first place because they know it's a stupid idea.
That's true. It's
But
like, nope, I'm good. I'm not leaving my house.
yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for parents of kids who might be like ADHD on how to navigate that sort of challenge in terms of like maybe they are getting overwhelmed, but at the same time they also crave it because of the combo ADHD?
Yeah, I think obviously as soon as you can, it's trying to get that self-awareness in the child themselves so that they can start to monitor that, to try and maybe arrive late, leave early at any kind of event, to manage the bits that you can. Maybe it's ear defenders, maybe it's still bringing your own food, maybe it's sort of thinking about where is it, who's going to be there, how long do they like, we time them, how long are they going to last? Okay, we're 30 minutes in, this is probably soon going to go horribly wrong and there'll be tears. So I think it's saying to the kid, if you can, yes, we must go, of course we must go, but that after an hour or whatever, you get sad, or so how are we going to deal with that? We're going to have a little break. Is parents going to stay? I think it's, yeah, trying to work out in advance that child's capacity and that child's real enjoyment of that kind of stuff. I think being
Yeah.
outdoors is better. So if it's any kind of activity where there's a lot of movement involved, then that always works for the ADHD bit. A bit more space. Also, I guess if it's your own child's party, then really thinking about the activities that child will enjoy, whether sharing is a thing that they're cool with or not. Yeah, it's all of that sort of little stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I think that, something you mentioned there, I wish I had known as a child because one of the things that you just said that really resonated with me is I distinctly remember in like middle school and high school wanting to go to these parties that I was invited to. And I would go there, I'd be really excited at first, doing everything. And then in an hour, I'd be like, I'm done. I want out. But I'd have to stay the whole time. And I never thought to ask or tell my parents, like, hey, can I leave early? Like, I never
Yeah.
processed that. So I feel
No, no.
like, I don't know if it's been your experience, but for me and like my kids, we tend to have a hard time vocalizing what we're feeling inside and like telling people we need help or we want something to change. So I guess that's like one thing that I'm just learning now talking to you is like, oh, as parents, we could also proactively like ask our kids so that they don't have to come and tell us, because that's what I would have
Yes.
needed.
Yeah, yeah. Or some, sometimes if the words are not there, it's just a signal, isn't it? That maybe certainly for my partner and I, if one of us has had enough, we just give each other a bit of a nudge, and then it's kind of like, okay, we're out of here, and yeah. Sometimes you want to save face in front of your peers or something. So maybe it's a text message, maybe it's a little squeeze of the hand, maybe it's a word that you agree between you, that it's like, okay, we're done here, and yeah, time to move on, I suppose. And particularly when you're in the throng of it as a kid, you end up getting a bit giddy, a bit overexcited, and then it all starts to go wrong because you start pushing everybody and throwing them around because you just love them so much and you want to
Yeah.
grab them.
That's definitely my middle child. She's a climber. She climbs on people. So what advice would you give to parents or caregivers who suspect their child might be ADHD, but they're not really sure how to proceed with either a diagnosis or finding some sort of support for them?
Yeah. I think sometimes I mean, depending on the services for diagnosis, and this will vary across the world, I guess, that sometimes the diagnoses will be done separately by two completely different teams of people, and sometimes they might all be done under the same assessment process. So I guess there's a load of self-tests, there's a load of questionnaires online that you can do for both autism and ADHD. If you just Google, online tests, self-test children. So it's all about getting evidence. I think what we see, and as I mentioned earlier about women sometimes getting these mental health diagnoses, that sometimes the children are not getting either diagnosis because one is kind of hiding the other, that they're too socially motivated to be seen as autistic, for example, or they're too routine based and rigid to be seen as ADHD, for example. So as a parent, you've got to demonstrate that you meet both sets of criteria. And so anything you can come up with. I don't know how it is. I mean, I don't think you can diagnose ADHD. I don't think it's a UK thing, before 7. So if your
Down
child is
here,
below
it's before
7,
5.
oh, before 5. Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So in the UK it's 7, in the US it's 5. So if you're much younger than that, just keep gathering evidence, and you need evidence of both of those criteria in order to get both diagnoses. So I guess that's all about thinking about those sorts of things. If I could give some other general little examples of some people I met that, again, may or may not be an ADHD thing, but it seems to me that it kind of demonstrates how the two work together. So, for example, we might see some ADHD people as sensory seekers. They like salty food, they like crunchy food, they like fizz. So things that do something. Fizzy water, because flat water is just too dull to be drunk by a person with ADHD.
I relate.
And and really crunchy food, crisp, salty stuff, really kind of really feel it. Texture, makes a noise when you bite it in your head. It's great. You feel like, yay, I'm alive. What we might see in the AuDHD is a desire for those things, but only exactly the same ones, day after day after day. Whereas an ADHD person, they may not mind what they eat. They might like lots of different crunchy foods, but it may be that the autistic person only eats one flavor of crisps, one brand of crisps, one drink, one fizzy drink. So we've got the sensory seeking, but we've also got the sameness at the same time. Another example of a woman that I met who I did an assessment for online, and she had both. She had ADHD, and her entire house was colored like the rainbow. Every piece of furniture, every wall, every cushion, her toaster, her kettle was in these amazing rainbow colors, and it was beautiful. Absolutely minimalist, nothing out of place, absolutely perfect. Not kind of, oh my God, that's too much. It was genuinely, wow, that is beautiful. I'm not sure an autistic person might want all of that color. And I'm not sure a pure ADHD person would have coordinated it so beautifully and had it so absolutely perfectly laid out. Every single thing symmetrical, lined up, balanced, perfect. So again, I think where we have this color but order, we're kind of looking a little bit at the both of those sorts of things.
That's funny because when you mention color, I've always been really obsessed with mint green. That's why it's our color for Autism Wish and Embracing Autism. And almost
Yeah,
everything in my house is mint green, all my walls painted, all my tiles. And the one other person that I know who's also ADHD has the same thing, but like with fall colors. So it's like something that I've seen unique to neurodivergence that like we, I don't know about you or them, but for me, it's like I get genuine joy. Like when I see that color somewhere, it like
yeah,
elicits an
yeah.
emotional reaction from me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes what I've seen in the ADHD houses, and sometimes it's actually I'm extremely sensitive to contrast and glare. And so you know, I meet someone online to do an assessment, and I look at their wallpaper behind them, and I'm thinking, that's a migraine. That's me done for the rest of the day with a migraine, because there's so much going on. There, you know, it's full of wonderful things that they found from all over the place, and wild, wild colors. But for me, that's a headache. So I think,
Yeah,
yeah, it's there's our environments are interesting sometimes. I think they say a lot about us in
that's
the way
true.
we manifest these kinds of things.
Yeah, I always refer to that to my husband as like visual noise because I tell him that I'm like, there's too much visual noise. I can't do it.
Yeah, yeah, I do. When we go like to an art gallery or out into a city, I just go, I'm so tired of looking, and I have to go home now because my
Yeah.
I'm just there's too much looking has happened.
Do you feel the same way with crowds? Because for me, like, I don't like crowds for a variety of reasons. One is I don't like constantly being touched, like all the
Yeah,
bumping shoulders. I don't like the constant humming noise. But I also really don't like the visual noise of just all these heads floating everywhere. And I was wondering,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
do you have any like similar experience to that?
Yeah, I think the frustration, I think the autistic frustration, which my partner and I share, him more than me, is people getting in the way when
Yeah, I get that.
why don't they move? Why don't they do this? Why don't they know where they and yeah, just this sort of assumption that you're the only one trying to, you know, to get out the way. And
Navigate.
I often say to him, well, you know, maybe it's because you're walking 3 times faster than them, so you keep bumping into people or something. I've recently moved to a flat in a city, and I'm on a really busy little area with lots of little shops and cafes and things. And I've realized that I absolutely love it because I can't hear it at all. There's no noise inside, but I have this huge window that overlooks all these cars and people and shops and cafes. So it's like having the TV going all of the time, and I'm entertained by all these people, and I see the same ones go by and all of those kind of things. But I don't have to talk to them. I don't have to bump into them. I don't have to interact with them in any way, but I get to see them. And actually, I to me that feels like I don't want to be completely alone and you know, very isolated and never see anyone, but I don't always want to talk to anybody. So so these are
That's
like
so
my
funny.
little this is my little pets out there.
It's like you have like a little aquarium, like a fish tank, and
Yes,
you're just watching them.
exactly. Exactly.
But
I'm like that.
I do know another ADHD person who's exactly like that. It's like I want to live in the city so I can see the city, but I don't want to interact with the city.
Exactly. I
Uh,
love I love the fact that it's busy. I love the fact that people are out and about and wandering around. I absolutely love it. I get very bored in the country, but I also need that empty expanse of nature with no people in it.
yeah,
But yeah, this is my little fish tank that I live in.
yeah.
It's fantastic.
See, I feel the opposite. I feel like there's always so much going on in my head that I want to be out where there's nothing because it's like the only
Right.
way I can decompress because my brain is like
Yeah.
on 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
need two houses. That's what I need.
yeah, one for the city, one for the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask before we let you go, I want to make sure that I get this question in because we ask everybody this question, and our podcast is called Embracing Autism. What that means to everyone is something different. So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what does the concept of embracing autism mean to you?
I think it's just embracing everybody to me, and it's just finding out what people need and treating everybody like a human being, and just allowing people to be themselves and to say, "What do you need from me?" And that's all I ever try to do for anyone. Is just what do you need?
Simple and sweet.
Yeah.
um, so before we let you go, can you share with our listeners where can they find you? Do you have a website or anything?
My I have a well, my daughter now runs the business that I set up, and that's asperger-training.com. And she does webinars and training and all of those kind of things. I don't do any of that anymore. Um, you can certainly find me on YouTube, various conference presentations I've done on anxiety, on autistic happiness, on women and autism can be found if you just search for my name and autism, up I pop. Um, got a book, Could I Really Be Autistic, out in October. And the AuDHD book won't be out until January 2027, which feels like a very, very long time away. But it's going to take me a year to write it, and then it takes them a year to make it.
Okay.
So yeah,
And
that's me.
that first book you mentioned, is that available on Amazon in the US by any chance?
It
Or
will
where can
be.
they find it?
The women and girls one, it's a second edition, is on everywhere. It's also been translated into various languages, including Spanish, Chinese,
Okay.
Japanese, all sorts of things. Yes, Amazon, anywhere you could
Okay.
find that. That's called, I'm very poor at knowing the titles of my own books, Women and Girls on the Autism Spectrum. And the other one, Could I Really Be Autistic? I'm not sure if it's out for pre-order yet, but it will be soon. They're all published by Jessica Kingsley, which are the main, certainly in the UK, the main autism publisher. And that's co-written with my daughter Jess. For anyone who thinks they might be autistic, but maybe is a bit too shy to go and talk to anyone about it yet. So it's a bit of a workbook to for them to take them through to decide whether they want to go for assessment or self-diagnose or yeah. So if
Absolutely.
anyone gives you that book for Christmas, they're trying to tell you something.
Hint, hint. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been a really informative interview. I really learned a little bit more as we were talking. Things were kind of popping up. So I really appreciate you taking the time. And I really think that our audience is going to learn a lot from this episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.